First, let's turn to some political stories of this morning. It is coming up to 5:19. Boris Johnson's considering plans to give people who rent from housing associations the right to buy their homes at a discount. Alys Watson Brown joins us, political commentator and contributor to Young Voices UK. Good morning.
Good morning, Callum. Thank you for having me on.
Pleasure. Now, I would like to not assume, so if you don't mind, I'm going to ask, would you consider yourself part of Generation Rent?
I'm still a student, so not quite yet have I tried to buy a property, but I assume I will be, yes, given that it doesn't look like the problem's going away.
Would you like the right to buy that Boris Johnson is considering giving you, potentially?
Yes, of course, although I think this direction of this policy is more electoral optics to redeem the economic damage that has been done, specifically to the sort of the Midlands, the red wall seats that Boris Johnson hasn't been able to weaponise the majority of. Obviously, we all know that house prices have been increasing since the financial crisis, and especially in some area of the Midlands. It's not just in London and in the south. Some prices have risen by over 5%. So I think, given that the north were especially disproportionately affected by lockdowns, obviously the cost of living, and most of the new red wall Conservative MPs were against lockdown on economic grounds. This certainly looks like a sort of a vote winner, trying to redeem himself after Partygate and get away from that sort of nasty party Tory sleazy image. But I mean, I'm not going to complain if it helps me. So
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? And that is why it could be successful. There are about 2.5 million households, 5 million people, that is, in England who rent from housing associations and could benefit. And so that is the point, too, that there are millions of people who might benefit from this.
Exactly. It's a very practical suggestion with a very clear benefit. And to be honest, if this is enacted, then I wouldn't be surprised if it was. I think, as the Daily Express said, it would be a vote winner. Yeah,
really interesting. Let's go on then to Boris Johnson, who's going to tell Ukraine today, this is your finest hour. Of course, reminiscent of Winston Churchill. It's notable, isn't it, the kind of perception of Boris Johnson in Ukraine, which is that he has been, and indeed the UK have been, a wonderful support in this time of war. What do you make of this use of language by Boris Johnson?
I see it sort of, it's, once again, great optics for redemption after Partygate, but painting himself as a noble figurehead, as well as, I suppose, the Churchill reference is there to tug the heartstrings of British spirit and evoke unity in a time where, as a country, internally, we don't feel very unified in the slightest. But Zelensky has specifically praised Boris Johnson for the help. And Zelensky also referenced Churchill and the same kind of World War II imagery when he made a plea to our parliament, obviously earlier this year. And it also comes in the context when we have British citizens who are captured in Ukraine. And, there are obviously great concerns about their safety. But this package just seemed comprehensive. It's £300 million worth of military aid. We've acquiesced to specialised Ukrainian requests for vehicles to help remove refugees and citizens from war-torn areas, especially Mariupol. So this, you could see it as a, gosh, well done, Boris Johnson. This is what he was made for. But you could also see it in a more pessimistic way, as I usually tend to. He's trying to damage control for the imminent council elections.
Do you think that's really what it is? That he and his support for a country that is being ravaged by Putin, Russia, and the Russian military that is at war, that actually he's using that to his own political advantage? Is that really what we should take away from this, rather than lending support to a democratic Eastern European country who is suffering at the hands of a mad person?
No, I don't think he's helping Ukraine for political optics or strategy in the slightest. I think it's merely you pointed out the Churchill referencing. And I think that in itself is a political strategy to, as I said, tug the heartstrings of the British people. I'm not suggesting at all that, Boris Johnson is helping Ukraine purely to aid his own image in the slightest. I'm just saying the way he does it is notable and interesting, especially in the context that, we are particularly fragmented politically at this time.
Yeah, interesting point. Let's go on then to this story. Boris Johnson facing calls to support the introduction of compulsory training for MPs after fresh revelations about sexism and harassment in Westminster. Of course, Neil Parish, the latest MP who was caught in scandal, he deliberately watched pornography in the House of Commons. But through the week last week, we were hearing really some quite horrific and distressing accounts of experiences, particularly of women, in the House of Commons. And I just wonder if training MPs is going to be part of the solution here.
Yeah, this is a very contentious and sticky topic. You know, whilst I don't believe that every male MP is a sexist bigot, and I think it would be reductive towards women who have been victims of misogyny and sexual assault to say that, you can no longer turn a blind eye. It's not the 1970s anymore when, you know, supposedly touching up a woman was normal. It's 2022. The world has changed and Westminster has to change with it, and it's no longer acceptable. This sort of, you know, anti-misogyny, sexism training, it really depends what it entails. I think it would be rather patronizing if it says, oh, this is what you say and don't say to a woman. I think this has to be very sensitively done, comprehensive, but also not treating MPs like as though they're children, because in a way that's not going to tackle the problem.
A lot of them are behaving, in fact, they're not even behaving like children. They're behaving like out of control. I don't even know what the word is, but it is degrading, and the behaviour in Westminster is, you know, you would expect better on a lad's holiday to Magaluf.
I agree. I think there was a journalist on the show earlier talking about that there's this sense of entitlement that the only people who can rid MPs of their job are the voters. You know, they're not held accountable to their boss every single day. But it will catch up with them if this keeps going. And the sleaze is undeniable. And, you know, I think when you're hearing all, aside from the horrible allegations of misogyny and sexual assault, hearing about MPs watching porn in Parliament, it gets to a point where things like that just become laughable and you just go right over your head.
Alys, good to speak to you this morning. Thank you for your thoughts. Nice to have you on the programme. That is Alys Watson Brown, political commentator and contributor to Young Voices UK. It's 5